What's up, everybody? I'm Skull.
I'm Zombie Cat.
And this is the Horror Den. Now, today is a very special episode because we are celebrating 100 subs.
Woo!
Now, I know that may not seem like a big number to a lot of people, but that's a big deal to us that thought we would maybe get 5 views on every video. So we greatly appreciate all the love and support that we've been given since we started this a few months ago. If you enjoyed today's content, please like and subscribe and comment, just let us know if there's any movie suggestions for the future. But without further ado, we're going to get into our review of Smile, as voted on by you, the viewers.
This has been requested since our first video. I think this has been the most highly requested video, so hopefully it pays off. Now,
any preamble stuff you want to get out of the way, Zombie Cat?
So I know what he's referring to. He wants me to tell a story. We have a funny story with this movie. It was late one night, and he hadn't seen the movie yet. I had already seen it maybe once or twice. I don't remember. And you were home alone. It was pretty late. I don't remember how late, but it was dark. And we started watching it, and this man turned into the biggest chicken I've ever seen in my life. I guess that's the best way to phrase it. We got about halfway through the movie, and he was like, "Yeah, I think that's a good stopping point, man. I think we need to cut it off right there."
Okay, just for some context, my wife was out of town. It was her bachelorette party, and so I had him over, and it was just, it's very rare for a horror movie to actually, disturb me. I mean, if you go back and watch our other movie reviews, I usually score pretty low on a lot of scariness factor. But going into this, I didn't know if my original anticipated score would hold up, and we'll get to that at the end. But it really did get under my skin, and it still does. So.
Yeah, I remember when I left, you didn't want me to leave. I think you said you turned on Markiplier, and that's how you had to fall asleep.
No, as soon as you left, I locked the door. I went to my bedroom. I closed it. I turned on Markiplier, turned that son of a bitch up loud as hell, and went to bed. And woke up for work the next day. But anyway, I doubt that some of you care about our personal stuff. So
it's just a funny short story.
But we'll get into our review. So today we are reviewing Smile, directed by Parker Finn. This was his first ever film that he directed.
I didn't know that until a few minutes ago.
Yeah, which very impressive.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And it's starring Sosie Bacon, which we've seen a little bit of her work throughout the years, I'm pretty sure.
I can't pinpoint what she's been in, but I know I've seen her before.
Yeah, she has one of those faces. But anyway, so the movie starts off with Dr. Rose Cotter. She is a psychotherapist at a hospital unit, and we see her taking care of a patient named Carl, who comes up periodically through the movie, who's kind of having a manic episode.
He's a pretty regular patient there, apparently. They've been there, done that. They know his deal.
And then we see her in her office. She's about to leave for the day. She walks out. The phone rings. She rushes back in, and she answers the phone. It's a new patient who's just arrived that we actually saw in the shot before.
And before this happens, her boss called her in to talk to her, and she told she told him she thought this lady needed treatment, and he was getting on to her, being a company being oh, she doesn't have insurance, that means we gotta pay for it, etc. But
yeah,
I think he told her she's been working 80-hour days or 80-hour weeks.
80-hour days.
Yeah. I meant weeks. She's been working 80-hour weeks, and she needs to take some time off. So
that doesn't happen till later.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm getting mixed up there. He tells her to go home essentially, but she leaves for the day, and she's about to go home. She closes the door, and then her phone rings.
Yeah. She comes back, answers it. It's a new patient receiving, which we saw in the previous shot, screaming, being brought in on a gurney.
Oh, it's a cool shot too.
Yeah.
It's from a bird's eye view. You see her just struggling in these restraints.
But she goes to the room where they talk. I guess it's called an examining room, I guess, or a therapist room.
I don't know I
don't know the terminology.
My dad told me what it was, but I can't.
The psych eval room.
Yeah.
Essentially. And so she sits with this girl named Laura, who is very disturbed. You can tell just by looking at her.
Oh yeah, she's seen some stuff.
Oh yeah, and it's revealed right before the doctor walks in that she witnessed a professor, unalive themselves in front of her using a claw hammer.
Yeah.
And so they're going into this thinking that it's probably some kind of post-trauma psychosis. And so she goes to review her mental state.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but she's saying like what eventually our main character will be saying, but she's trying to be like, it's not a hallucination. I am like a very good college student getting like some kind of impressive degree.
Yeah, she's a PhD candidate.
Like she is, but she is, of course, our main character being a therapist. She's like, it's probably, but
we didn't even touch on what Laura is saying she saw. So she's seeing something that mimics other people, and including her, one of her dead relatives that died when she was 7.
I can't remember what she said.
And it's always smiling at her. And basically, Rose is trying to rationalize it and all this. And then while she's talking about it, Laura's kind of looking down and then looks back up, and she just starts screaming and saying like it's in the room. And then she starts choking out and goes quiet while Rose like grabs the emergency phone, calls for help. She turns around, Laura's standing there smiling at her, very disturbing smile that just
it's like the poster picture, I believe.
It's the one,
smile from the cover of the
it's
poster.
The one that we made our post that we were going to do this. That's that same one.
I used the picture.
But she's you see a broken vase or vase, whichever you prefer.
When this happened, she like tripped over and it knocked over a vase.
Yeah, she grabs a shard of the vase and she like smiles and stares at Dr. Cotter while she cuts from her cheek all the way across her
like
throat.
Her right cheek, like down her throat, and it like makes a smile on like the hospital like blanket, and it's pretty cool.
But
it's like so visceral. That scene. I want to shout out the music in that scene too. It makes me think of one of my favorite horror movies, Sinister. Like it's like a weird, like distorted, like violin sound playing while she's like it doesn't cut from it either. You see the entire thing happen. It's so like visceral and like just
And it's also the fact that like the body stays completely still. Like there is no reaction physically
outside of her face stretching to the cuts. That's it.
But Dr. Cotter witnesses this entire event, and she's thoroughly traumatized, as anyone would be. And so she goes home, and so she's drinking her wine, and trying to decompress from the day, and she's in her dining room, like right off the kitchen.
Oh, and also when she gets home, she notices she still has like blood like droppings on her.
But
gown.
She looks up, and there's Laura standing in the corner smiling at her.
It's such a great shot. Like if you've seen Hereditary, it's like the grandmother scene at the beginning of the movie. She's like standing in the corner and she's just like faintly seen in the shadows, like just smiling. It's so scary.
Yeah. And
it sits on that shot for a good second too. It's so uncomfortable.
But then in comes A-Train.
I can't stop.
I mean, they're just kidding. I don't know the actor's name, but it's the actor.
Like, I can't think of his name.
But it's the actor who plays A-Train. But in this movie, his name is Luke.
I don't know. He's not really.
Trevor. His name is Trevor.
He's not that important.
But anyway, his name is Trevor in this movie. But I needed to make the A-Train joke.
Season 4 of The Boys just came out.
Yeah, so you have to excuse us. But anyway, so he comes in, she drops the wine glass, gets startled, and they talk about their day, how awful it was for her. So that night, it turns out that Dr. Cotter, well, I'm gonna call it Rose. So Rose and Trevor have dinner plans with her sister and brother-in-law.
I believe newly engaged. Kinda.
Well, I'm not sure that it's ever really specified, but we just know engaged.
Yeah, like because I know. We'll get to it later.
Yeah. But anyway, so they go to dinner with her sister and brother-in-law, which, by the way, her sister's an absolute bitch. Valley girl to the max.
Yeah, very. I think she's just like a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah, stay-at-home PTA mom.
Not anything against stay-at-home moms, but she's using it as like, oh, my life is so hard, and like this our main character literally just saw
witnessed
someone.
that happen. It's just in comparison,
she's
it's funny.
making fun of what she does for a living, being like, "Oh, when are you gonna get a real job? You work on Saturdays?" Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm offended.
Same. But she basically ends up, blowing up on these two assholes, critiquing her life and all this other stuff.
And I think it's mainly because I think she forgot like her son's birthday was this Saturday.
Yeah, but also what really makes her blow up is the fact that her sister asks why they can't get rid of the house that they grew up in.
Sell the family home because something we didn't mention at the beginning that just slipped out of my head. It starts with Rose as a little girl and her mom has overdosed in the bed. That's all we see at the beginning. So she has memories of that being there, and that happened. So I forgot to mention that.
And then after that scene, it cuts to the next day. She's going back to work, and the detective that interviewed her after the unaliving incident, his name is Joel. He comes up a lot through this movie. It turns out that Joel and Rose here have a history. It seems that they used to be an item. That's not really revealed till much later, but it's not a spoiler. So anyway, but he comes to like check up on her, gets met with a cold shoulder, so he leaves. She goes to her office, receives a phone call. I think it's from her sister apologizing for the night before.
Right.
And she looks out the window and she sees Laura down in the courtyard standing there staring up at her, smiling.
Yeah, super creepy.
Yeah, and then it cuts away. She goes down the hallway, and we've all seen this from the trailer if you've watched it, but she's walking down the hallway. She passes by Carl's room, and Carl is sitting on the edge of his bed, smiling at her. And so she goes in to try to check on him. She starts doing his little spiel that he's been doing, and then he looks at her.
He's repeating these phrases like, "I'm gonna die, my mom's gonna die, my dad's gonna die, my family's gonna die.
No one matters."
Yeah, it's like he's like repeating himself constantly.
But then he looks at her and like still smiling, and it's just like, "You're gonna die. You're
gonna die."
And so she backs out of the room and she yells for help, and people start running, and she looks back, and there's Carl asleep, laying in bed.
I was making a joke. I was like, what if he was feeling better? What if he was like, you know what? I'm calmed down. I feel better today. This man's a 5150.
Get him down on the ground.
He's like, no. I'm like, you just ruined this dude's day.
Yep, absolute ruin. Any progress that has been made has been erased from the chalkboard. Start over. But after this event, her supervisor pulls her in, which is Kumar from Harold and Kumar. I don't know his name either. And from House. But he basically says, hey, you've been working 80-hour weeks. I'm afraid you're not getting any sleep. And also you just witnessed this traumatizing event. I'm making you take a paid week off. And so she says no, but then agrees because she has no choice.
At this point, I believe is when she stops at the train store.
Yeah, she goes to buy a model train for her nephew, which her sister advised something to do with trains.
When she was on the phone with her sister, kind of faintly listening, she was like, oh, if you need any ideas, he's into like electric model trains. Yeah,
and then she goes home and has another glass of wine, and then all of a sudden her alarm goes off, which she drops another glass and breaks it. And I literally wrote down, poor girl can't hold a glass. And then she gets a phone call from the security company. She answers it, routine questions. And then the operator asks, are you alone in the house? She says yes. The operator follows it up with, are you sure? And it takes a creepy turn. And the operator's like, look behind you.
Yeah, pulls like a PT.
Yeah, and as she turns to look behind her, the phone rings again. It's out of her hands. It was a hallucination. And she answers the phone. It's the same operator's voice, same questions, and then it cuts to a new scene.
And she did notice that her back glass.
Yeah, the back door was open.
Yeah.
So she calls some cops. They do a routine check. Nothing's going on. Trevor shows up,
and he makes a comment saying, "You broke another glass?
Did you break another glass?" Oh, also it's mentioned after right before he makes that joke, they can't find the cat mustache.
Yeah,
it's seen from the beginning.
They start. I think this is after that scene because it's once they're winding down for bed.
Yeah,
she's tapping on a
mustache.
bowl with a fork, and she's like getting his favorite food. She's calling out into the woods. She can't find her cat, which was shown earlier in the movie.
Yeah, cute cat. That night she has a dream, re-seeing her mother dead on the bed from an overdose, and then if her mom wakes up at the end with like a gasp at the same time that she wakes up. A really cool transition. Just had to add that.
This movie
in there.
has great cinematography. This is a good time to throw that in there. If you've seen Candyman, there's a lot of those like contorted shots where the camera flips with the movie. It's super cool. That happens a lot in the movie.
So she wakes up in the middle of the night, you know, kind of obsessed about what she's seeing and the hallucination. So she goes over the tapes of Laura and herself talking. She finds that while Laura was committing her act in front of her, there was a whisper, and so she enhances the audio, and it says her name. And she listens to it like 3 times, and when I tell you that this was one of the most earned jump scares ever, because it zooms in on the camera, and you can see the waves, like on the laptop, and you can see the waves of the speech.
Yeah, you can see the waves where it whispers her name, Rose, and like you can see like the sound waves.
Squiggles.
Yeah, and then she replays it again, and it's flat. And when it hits that part of the audio,
it hits it. It goes over like 3 times. It's like triple the length of just silence, and then her mom or Laura, we don't know, like is right there in her ear yelling her name, and scares her. So the next day she decides to go to her therapist, revisit her therapist.
And I want to mention something too. This movie does a good job at fake outs, because that's something I typically despise in movies, is when something's happening and it's not really happening. But at least this movie has somewhat of an excuse for that to be happening, because it's tormenting her. It's like...
Yeah, I mean, also, if you have a differing opinion, if you think that we're being a little too hard on other fake outs just because we seem to like this movie, just let us know. Like, if you disagree, let us know.
There's really nothing in this movie that's a fake scare, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Like, there's maybe one where like a phone rings or something. It's like, but it's mostly in this movie, it's something to be scared of when there's a jump scare, which is the proper way to do a jump scare.
Right. So as I was saying, the next day she decides to go to see her therapist to try to get some medication. And the doctor won't give her more, but advises that they should start meeting again.
It's like a
antipsychotic.
Yeah, and like he just said, she mentions that she's seen this therapist before, so she was like, I think we should resume our weekly sessions from now on. But she didn't give her the drugs, but she said we'll see how it goes in the future.
Right. And then it cuts to what I have wrote down as the birthday from hell. So
it's such a great scene. It's so so messed up.
Oh my god. This scene really puts into perspective what you're in for. I feel like it's the scene that really shows you what you're in for. And she goes to her nephew's birthday party. It's a normal kid's birthday party. She's a little
it's like the first time since the movie started, you feel like things are like, she's putting on her makeup.
Yeah.
She's smiling, and then she's like,
Never mind.
But she gets there, everything's bright and colorful. Like there's a cool like tone change in the movie. Like everything's bright. She's like, all of her sister's friends are like, oh, we'll get you some drinks and stuff.
She's a little dissociated. You can tell by the way that the audio warps and stuff, which I liked. That was a cool touch. But then it gets to the opening of presents. You know, it's a normal kid's birthday. Everything's great. Then it comes to her birthday present, and they're like, that's from Aunt Rose. And he's like, thumbs up. And
she did stop at the train store earlier. And before, what was she doing before? She was wrapping this present, but then something distracts her. I can't remember what it is that distracts her.
I can't remember either. It's okay.
But either way, earlier in the movie, she stops at the train store. She does pick up the train. There's a cool like zoom out shot of like a Fallout like classic styled art of a kid smiling, of course, and you see her wrapping the train in like a box.
No.
Or we'll see.
Anyway, so fast forward back to what I was saying. She that present's from Aunt Rose. Thumbs up. He begins to open the present. There's like this excited energy, and he peels back the paper on the inside, and then just looks dead quiet. And everybody's like, "What'd you get?" And then he pulls out a dead cat.
Mustache.
Her cat. And instantly she starts freaking out, like, "I didn't do this, you gotta believe me."
Everyone's like backing up. They're like scared of her. She's having a panic attack, and she's like holding her cat. She's crying. She's like, "My cat." But everyone thinks that she put this mangled, murdered cat inside of this kid's box, and she proceeds to see Laura from the beginning of the movie is in the house, sitting in the side, smiling at her, and does like a jump towards her, and it knocks her back onto a glass table, and she stands up, and you can see these shards like stuck inside of her arm. This movie has great practical effects, by the way,
and we'll get to more of that later.
Yeah. But yeah, like she has just glass just stuck in her arm. It's very visceral.
And it makes you feel so bad for her.
Yeah, this is like the desperation moment where you're like, oh man.
So Rose's life is officially falling apart. Her sister really doesn't want anything to do with her.
Her fiance. She's crazy. The therapist won't give her
medication. So she decides to start looking into the death of the professor that Laura saw before they met. And she starts to hear things in the hallway. She hears her dead mom's voice. And so she decides to go to bed, and as she turns over, you can see the silhouette of her mom standing in the hallway.
Yeah, it's
very
a really
creepy.
Good scene. She's like sitting in her bed, and like you just see a black room like to her side, like pitch black, and you just hear her mom like whispering her name, and she's like, "Come here." It's like she just pulls up her covers and goes to sleep. And there's something funny we didn't mention when she gets out of the hospital for her arms, like they're all bandaged up and stuff. They get back, and she's talking to her fiance, who at this point is like, "You're nuts." He says that he started like doing research on is mental illness like hereditary. And she starts like freaking out on him, like, I'm not crazy, and then she's like, I'm sorry. It cracks me up, and he's like, she's screaming at him that she's not crazy, but then she keeps saying, I'm sorry. It happens like 2 times.
It's really funny.
It is. This is before what we were talking about.
So after doing a little research, she decides to visit the doctor's house under the guise of being a reporter. She speaks to the deceased's wife, finds out a little bit about what he was seeing. It's shown some artwork, but also before, like when she's talking to her, we see what her husband looked like after the event. And when I say practical effect, this man's jaw is like almost unhinged, and
tongue,
it's just,
like you see his tongue like warping over his jaw.
It's really cool. It reminds me of John Carpenter's The Thing, just a little bit. And so he drew what he was seeing, and we see these really like disturbing but cool artwork of the smile, and we see like his dead brother that died in a car accident 20 years ago, and he never got over it, which is important. And
I
then
really like the one drawing in the office of the dude's head like split, and then he's like holding the other piece of his head while it's like smiling. I really like that one.
And then she reveals to the wife that she's seen these things too, that her husband was
she's
crazy.
faking being a reporter to talk to this lady and find out more information.
And I don't know why she didn't just say like, I'm a psychiatrist and I have a patient.
You see the reaction of it. She doesn't want nothing to do with it because she thought her husband was crazy.
But she gets kicked out of the house, and so she goes to Joel for help to find, because it is revealed by the wife that her husband witnessed another unaliving event at a conference he was at the week before of an older lady who was a real estate agent, which we find that out in the next scene. So she goes to Joel to find out information about this lady. Turns out she was involved in a witness report of another unaliving event the week before that, and they start to pick up a paper trail.
Yeah, it's like one after another. They're just like chaining. It's typically, I think they said the shortest one was 4 days.
4 to a week.
Yeah, 4 days to a week, I believe, is the lifespan you have after.
But after that event, she goes home, gets ambushed by her fiance and her therapist. There's a big fight, blow up. She leaves. She goes to see her sister, and it doesn't go well. They dig up some pretty old wounds.
Yeah, she got some screenshots of the deaths that happened in the previous cases that she was linking together from Joel. He was making a joke about it was his 1 day off.
Yeah,
but
relatable.
But when she was there with Joel, though, she got screenshots of the crime scenes that had happened, and she's like, "Look!" She showed them to her sister, and she's like, "Why are you showing me this?"
Yeah, doesn't believe her. They dig up some old stuff about like the mom and how she, like the older sister, abandoned her to be left alone, and there's a lot of guilt there. So she goes to the car, and if you've seen the trailer, this is my one gripe about this movie. They showed this jump scare in the trailer, and I feel like it's one of the better ones.
If they didn't put that in the trailer. At the same time, that was like the hook of the trailer, is that jump scare.
But, she goes and sits in the car, and she's like, lost and doesn't know what to do. And you see her sister come out the door and start like walking quickly towards the car. She stops in front. You can only see from like her chest down. She knocks on the window. She looks up, says her sister's name, and then the sister's head like cracks and goes down, like looking upside down, smiling at her.
So awesome.
And she starts screaming, as any sane person would.
And then after this, she's like slamming her head and her arms on the dashboard of her car, and you see the kid who opened the cat for his birthday looking at her through the window with the same blank expression, like, she's crazy.
That poor kid. That poor kid is the unsung victim of this movie.
Maybe he's what the sequel will be about, because he has trauma now.
Maybe. So jumping ahead, like after that jump scare, Joel finds out. So Joel finds the paper trail that they'd kind of discovered, but he went deep. It was like 19 victims out of 20. And she was like, well, what happened to the one guy? And he's like, he brutally murdered someone, and he's in prison. And so they decide to go talk to him to see how he beat whatever this is. So she goes under the guise of being the therapist, and that she had a patient who's seeing this, and Joel was forced to leave the room, and the guy basically says that there was a chain of this in Brazil a couple years ago, and one guy escaped it by brutally murdering his neighbor in front of the neighbor's wife. And so he did the same thing, brutally killed somebody he did not know and gave it to someone else, and the cycle continued.
Yeah, he told her to tell the patient that she needs to make it the most gruesome, traumatic looking death possible to traumatize whoever sees it.
Because whatever this thing is, it feeds on trauma.
And it will spread to them.
And then she snaps and is like, I can't kill someone. And then he's like, it's you, and then freaks out.
Yeah, this dude, for the few seconds he was in it, he gives a freaking gnarly scream. He's like, get her away from me. It's awesome. Like, he's freaking out. Understandably.
So it cuts back to her being at home. She receives a phone call from her therapist. She refuses to answer. A little time skip happens. Like a little later in the day, she's like looking at all the crime scene evidence and all this stuff on her table, and she gets a knock at the door. She sees her therapist, cleans off the table, lets her in. They talk. The therapist apologizes for ambushing her, and in the middle of the conversation, the phone starts to ring, and the therapist is like, shouldn't you get that? And so she picks it up. It's her therapist on the phone to apologize.
It's kind of like what happened with the
security
police officers, yeah.
And she looks up and she's like, no. And the face contorts into a smile, and then this raspy, monstrous voice comes out of this lady and says, it's almost time, Rose. And then this really anxiety-driven chase sequence. Not even a chase sequence, but like almost a chase sequence happens.
She's backing up and she's moving forward.
Yeah, like this lady steps on the cushion that she was sitting on, steps on the back of the chair, and then steps down.
Yeah, it's really cool how still everything stays. I'm happy like they kept the couch like planted. Like it would have been goofy if it knocked over or whatever, but like it's how still she's moving towards her. It's so creepy, and she eventually grabs her by the face, and she's like drooling, and it kind of is teasing what creature we may see at the end.
So she goes to the hospital with a giant knife with the purpose of killing Carl in front of her supervisor to pass it on. And she actually does this, and we get this really cool scene of, Carl starts laughing while being stabbed, and then her supervisor rips off his face, revealing like the meat and the skeleton
While
underneath.
She's stabbing Carl, he starts like screaming with her and like sync. It's super creepy. But yeah, then her supervisor walks in like, "What are you doing?" But then he just starts like peeling his face down, like,
which is really cool.
Yeah.
But then it was all hallucination. She's still in her car, and so she freaks out a little bit. Her supervisor knocks on the window, notices the knife, notices she's not okay. He says that you don't need to be alone, and she's like, I need to be alone. She realizes that if she's alone, then nobody's in danger. And so she bolts away.
She calls Joel and is like, he's basically like, you can't just not leave forever, essentially. And she goes to her old family home where her mom overdosed. It's a very, like, it's a good drive. It seems like it's out in the country almost, and they pull up to a very reminiscent Evil Dead styled house. Like,
dilapidated, it hasn't been cared for.
It's very creepy. She opens the door. There's just like one lone chair in the living room, and she makes her way down the hall, and she sees someone sitting on the edge of the bed.
No, she gets a lantern first.
Yeah,
and then
lantern's important.
She goes back to her mom's room, and her mom is sitting on the edge of the bed. They talk, and she's like, "Why didn't you save me?"
It's also revealed a little bit earlier, we forgot to mention this, that she as a little kid could have called and got help for her mom, but she didn't because she was scared of her mom, essentially.
That reminds me a lot of the mom from Pet Sematary.
No, it's it is the mom, but it was her sister. She was too scared of her sister.
That is a sister. My bad. I just made myself look like an idiot. Leave that in. Anyway, they have this really good heart-to-heart talk where, and then she's like, "This is not real." And it's like, but your mind's making it real.
It contorts too when she's like, "Then why didn't you save me?"
Yeah.
It's like,
and it's like, your mind is so, like, it's like, I know you're this thing, and why are you doing this? And the creature says, like, your mind is so inviting, which, that's great. It's a great line. And then, like, the door is closing, you can see her kind of speeding up towards the door, and then her hand catches it, and it opens, and it's a giant mom.
Yeah,
it's
she
like
starts to, like, expand. Like, you can hear her, like, cracking as she's, like, growing bigger. Like, she gets freaking huge. Like, she's as tall as, like, the ceiling, and she starts, like, chasing her down the hall. It's so scary. Oh my gosh, it's such a great scene.
But basically, she was like, while she's being chased, she decides that, like, when after the conversation, I think that Rose has decided that she needs to absolve herself of her guilt that she has. Maybe that's the secret to beating this thing. And so, like, she decides to cleanse, like, her of her guilt and, like, saying it's not my fault. And she takes the lit gas lantern and throws it upon the monster, who then burns and supposedly dies as the house catches on fire.
Yeah, it's really cool. There's like you can see like a skeleton melting, and it's like crawling around on the floor like a dog. Like, it's so creepy.
But she leaves, gets in the car.
The house is burning down completely.
And she drives to Joel's house, and she talks about how, like, she always had a problem letting people in, and that's the end of the movie. I'm just kidding. I wish it was the end of the movie.
It would have been a very happy ending.
Very happy. But She gets to Joel's house, has this really heart-to-heart conversation, asks if she can sleep there and if he can stay there while she sleeps. And he said, yeah, I'll stay with you. And then there's a pause, and he says, I'll stay with you forever. And then he starts smiling and starts laughing. And the house's like whole demeanor changes, and she runs out the door as he chases her, and she's outside, and she turns around, she's back at her old house.
Yeah, it's really cool.
And then she hears Joel, the real Joel, call her name, and so she's like freaking out, saying no. And she runs back in the house, closes the door. There's the creature back. And then we have this really cool shot of the monster revealing what it really looks like as the face rips away.
One of the best like modern practical scenes I've seen in a while. Like it's really
Didn't
cool.
you say that the monster at the end of this is a real puppet?
It's either a puppet or it's a suit. I can't remember. I just know that I saw that they said it was very important that they use practical effects for the scene. So that always makes me very happy to see passionate horror creators, especially being his first film. I'm like, awesome.
And it's really cool design too. It's like the human skeleton with the muscle tissue, and there's the top teeth, and then there's bottom
like
jaw
rows
teeth,
and
it's just
rows.
rows of jaws like all the way down.
After the lady peels her face back, it's like flesh. That's how I can flesh and teeth and eyes.
And then we witness the creature like as
you see its full body.
Yeah, the full body as it grabs Rose's mouth and stretches it, and you can see like the skin tear, and it opens, and then it just cuts to Joel like coming in. She's not there. Looks around, and
he sees the lantern on the
ground, and he finds Rose standing at the back of the house with a gas can over
It's
her
a
head.
really creepy shot. It's just pitch black, and she's holding this like shaking.
Reminds me a lot of like Blair Witch.
Yeah.
Like the people in the corner of the basement.
Mm-hmm.
And she drops the gas can, and he's like shining a flashlight, and she turns around and she's smiling at Joel, and she has a box of matches, and then opens it, lights it, and then we get a close up on Joel's face as we see her light herself on fire, and we see the silhouette.
It's in like the reflection of his eyes.
We see her burning in his eyes, and that's the end of the movie.
Presumably setting up
Presumably.
the upcoming Smile too.
Which I don't think it's going to be a direct sequel. I think, at least in the way of like, oh, we're going to see Joel's point of view now. I think it's more like we're going to see what happened to Joel and going forward. But yeah, that Smile, guys.
Freaking awesome movie.
Yeah, and I know that I've heard most people like this movie. Only one of my friends doesn't like this movie. He thinks it's stupid, but I like this movie.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the better. I've kind of become more accustomed to like the artsy horror movies that take some thought and stuff.
Thank you, A24.
Yeah, for real. So when it comes to movies like this nowadays, I'm like, when you see the trailer, you're like, oh, it's just gonna be cheesy jump scares. But I remember the first time watching this, it caught me completely off guard. I'm like, it gives me James Wan vibes, and I love that. Like, you take a simple something like Insidious and The Conjuring, and you turn it into something like amazing. It's like, that's how you do it.
Which those movies are amazing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They're great.
Well, I mean, I think that any more discussion can happen with the scoring, so that's what we're going to go ahead and do. All right, so like always, heading into our scoring, as always, we start with story. So Zombie Cat, what did you think of the story of Smile?
The story, I'm gonna give a great solid 8 because it's really good on like the play of dealing with grief and trauma and mental illness and stuff like that. There's like a really good undertone story about that kind of stuff, and it's just really cool. Like this curse, it's like a curse story, but it's done very well. Like it's essentially just a passing kind of deal with this creature that we see at the end, which is awesome. But I think it's just handled so well that it deserves an 8.
I gave a 9 for story, for all the same reasons as Zombie Cat did. I just felt that it was so original. I know that there are other curse-based movies like It Follows that I've never seen, but I know the premise. But it's just the way it was executed and the way that they found a balance between paranormal, curse movie meets monster flick. Like, I really like that interesting balance. And also, like, for a horror movie, I mean, I don't want to say that this movie makes you think, because it really doesn't, but it, like, alludes to a lot of undertone.
Yeah, like I was
but, like, we mentioned A24, a lot of those you have to, like, research after to understand what you just watched. But this is not like that. This is not that deep, but it's deep. I just really enjoy it for what it is, and I think that how fleshed out the story is and how everything, I feel like it makes sense. I can't recall a single plot hole, which I love that. So I'm giving it a 9, because, I mean, if that doesn't deserve a 9 in my opinion, I don't know what does.
And it leaves just enough questions like, what is this creature? What's gonna happen to Joel? Like,
while I don't think that this movie needs a sequel, I'm interested to see what the sequel brings.
It scares me, because I said this movie reminds me a lot of one of my favorite movies, Sinister, and I don't want this to become a Sinister 2, one of the worst horror movies I've ever seen, so...
But we'll save those opinions for when we...
Unless it's directed by the same dude, and then I'll have pretty high hopes. I imagine that it would be.
I don't think that this movie needs a sequel, but I'm cautiously optimistic.
Sequels can be done.
Yeah, and they can be better than the original in very rare circumstances.
Like, in my opinion, The Conjuring 2, Aliens, like, go on.
But, so you gave it an 8, I gave it a 9. That gives us 8.5 for story. It's pretty good. Moving on now to characters. I feel like for a horror movie, most of the characters, at least all the main ones, and even some of the ones we don't deal with very much, are really fleshed out. Yeah. Like, there is no, like, cardboard cutout characters, it feels like. So, what is your opinion on that one?
For me, I think I'm gonna have to go with, like, a 7, because while the characters aren't bad or anything, nothing like that, the main performance is the lead actress for sure. Like, she is great, but when it comes to, like, the fiance and stuff like that, I didn't really care about him. Joel was cool, like, he was a good character, not a bad character, but he was good. Then there's just kind of side characters, and like you said, they're really fleshed out and stuff, but it's not enough for me to be like, that was incredible. But so I'd say like a solid 7, mainly just due to the lead actress's performance. Like, she does very good in this movie, conveying, you see her go from like a regular nurse therapist to being like this distraught, depressed, like she's going insane. It's awesome.
For characters, I gave it an 8. I felt the same way, except I even though I didn't care about some characters, I knew who they were. Like, I knew who the characters were. I knew their motivations. I knew why they were there. I knew why they were, like, important to the story. And I feel like because I couldn't question why someone was there, it deserves it.
That's a good point. Nobody feels unnecessary.
Yeah, there's no character that's like, oh, they're the comedic relief, or oh, why are you even here? What do you bring to the story? Everybody seems to have a purpose, no matter how big or how small, and I really enjoy that. Especially in like a horror movie, I feel like that's not very common.
Even like as small as the kid that you see 2 times. It's like, that's once again going back into story though, like planting trauma. It's like, it's kind of like that. But
the main like hook of the whole movie is so strong in the storytelling that it bleeds over into every character, and I like that. So yeah, I gave it an 8, you gave it a 7. That brings us to a 7.5 for characters, which is really good. I think that's one of our higher ones.
Yeah.
Now, this is an interesting one. Moving on to antagonist. The antagonist of this movie obviously is whatever supernatural entity the smile creature is.
I guess we count it as the creature at the end, but also it's the curse itself. But I think it's freaking awesome. Like, we've seen the smile in awful movies like Truth or Dare, but this movie does it right. So it gets a 9 because, man, it's scary. God, it's scary. And you can just feel something so sinister. It's like, oh my God, this thing wants to terrorize you.
Well, I can't believe I'm actually going to be able to give out one of these. I gave the antagonist a 10.
Yeah, I mean, I don't fault you. I mean, I could see it.
It's just the way that I have so many questions but also it's the design was cool. The execution of how it torments people is cool. The scares were cool, all revolving around it. The curse premise itself is genius in my opinion. Like, and the way it executes itself and passes on, absolutely cool. I know he mentioned Truth or Dare. I've never seen that movie either, and I know It Follows. I haven't seen that one, and so I have nothing really to compare it to. But I know that it's just the way that this captured, like, wow, look, if this could be real and we'd never know. Like, I love that, and so I can't find a single fault with the antagonist at all. So therefore, I can't give it less than a 10 in my personal opinion.
That's fair.
So yeah, that's a big deal for me.
Yeah.
But
perfect 10.
Yeah, perfect 10 for the antagonist for me. So you gave it a 9, I gave it a 10. That's a 9.5, which I think is our highest antagonist.
Yeah, definitely. The closest would be Peeping Tom.
Yeah. All right, moving on to humor for the movie. We talked about this right before we started recording. There are funny moments in this movie, but I do not think this is a funny movie at all.
And that's not a bad thing.
I feel like if there was any more humor than what there is, it would detract away from
the humor that's in here is like earned, but I had to even remind him of the funny parts we chuckled at, like I was saying earlier when she's like, I'm not crazy, sorry. And then there's that scene, and then there's the joke about how many wine glasses she breaks. It's like just little things like that gets a chuckle out of you. It's not supposed to be a funny movie necessarily. There's no comic relief, but there's just those two little moments that are kind of funny.
So for that reason, I gave it a 2 for humor, and that's not a bad thing.
No, I think it's great for this context.
I think for this movie in particular, I almost gave it a 0 for humor until I was reminded of the funny moments, and I was like, okay, then it needs some points
because they're small, but they are pretty funny.
If it was any higher, it would be a bad thing.
Yeah,
I'm serious.
So for that, I'd agree too. Like, I mean, because like we both agree, like it's not supposed to be funny, but those scenes are, of course. But like, just the whole movie, it would take away if there was like comedy to it. It just wouldn't fit the tone of the movie.
I definitely think that there's most horror movies, humor is a good thing. I think in this one,
here and there,
I think it would have ruined it. I think it would have ruined it if it was in this movie. Even like if there was as much humor as like in The Conjuring, I feel like it would ruin this movie. Because when we say, like, I know we kind of go through the synopsis pretty quick, but within the first 10 minutes, the horror starts.
It's very just sinister from beginning. It's like I was giving the creature such a high rating for. It's like you just got this sinister, like evil feeling. It's like so dark. The whole tone.
I find the creature and the whole plot as a whole unrelenting. That is a good word for it. Unrelenting. So we both gave it a 2. So that makes us a humor score of 2.
In a good way.
In a good way. Yeah, absolutely.
That's a good low score.
Now, the one that I'm usually really, really particular about, scariness. I'm just going to go ahead and start us off. Before we even decided to record this, I had an idea of what my scariness score was going to be, and I wanted to see if it held up, and sure enough, it did. While it didn't disturb me as much as the first time I watched
You'll never get that first reaction.
But I definitely still got creeped. So for that reason, I'm giving it a 9 for scariness. I don't think it's perfection, because I can't just not watch the movie. I think in order for me to give a 10 in scary, it's like I want to watch the movie again, but I won't be able to sleep after.
I don't know, man. You really didn't want to finish this movie the first time.
But I'm saying
the first time we watched this, he probably would have gave it a 10.
Yeah, maybe. But for that reason, I'm giving it a 9. And it's very rare for me to be like leave a movie like creeped out anymore. You know, when I was a kid, that was a magic that was captured by very few movies. Like for me, it was The Ring. You know, and a lot of people, it was the original It. For me, it was The Ring. But like this movie kind of captured that imagination just a little bit in my adult brain, and so like I got to give it a 9. You know, that's what we look for.
Yeah, and I'm gonna give it the same, a 9. Like, it's so scary. Like all the elongated shots of like people smiling, especially the opening scene with Laura cutting her throat, and just It's awesome. It really is. It's awesome in a terrifying way. It's so scary. Like, if you had never seen this movie and you're home alone and you watched it at like 2 a.m., good luck sleeping. It's rough. It's scary.
This movie made me realize that I have a phobia that I had no idea I had. Like, smiling people, not good. Not good for me.
Like you said, though, I don't think it's a 10 to where it's like I was traumatized.
Yeah.
Because I'm a weirdo and I did watch it home alone at 2 a.m., but it was a good thing. I was like, great. But there's only one movie that we haven't covered that gave me that feeling. But maybe 2 movies, but we'll get to those in the future.
All right. So we both gave it a 9, so that gives it a 9 for scariness. I'm pretty sure that's the highest scary total.
Maybe Late Night.
Maybe. We'll have to go back and review.
Yeah, I don't remember what we gave Late Night.
MacLeod, let us know. So, last and certainly not least, experience, the feeling of the movie as a whole. I think that our scores have pretty much given people an idea so far of what we're going to rate this. It's going to be high.
Oh yeah.
I rated this for experience a 9. I can't fault this movie. As much as like I have to be in the right headspace for it, I think that this movie has infinite rewatch ability for me. Like, yeah. I would glad if somebody's like, hey, let's watch a horror movie. I want to watch Smile. I would watch it probably at least once every couple months.
Yeah, I'm also gonna give it a 9. Just awesome, especially since it blew my expectations away. Once again, I've grown more into the artsy side of horror, and when I see trailers like this, like I mentioned earlier, I'm like, oh, it's gonna be a cheesy old nobody movie, but this movie blew me away. It's like, it shows you can do simple movies like this while having some depth. It still is, if you do it right, you can make it scary, and they excelled. This movie is awesome. I love it.
I knew this movie was going to scare me because I felt uncomfortable watching the trailers on YouTube when it was first coming out.
But that's once again what I was referring to. A lot of times the trailers will be pretty good, and then you watch it and you're like, that was pretty bad. But this movie even scared my dad, and that doesn't happen. So he watched it and he absolutely loved it. So that's an accomplishment.
So I gave it a 9 for experience. You gave it a 9 for experience. That gives us a 9 for experience. I definitely think that this is one of our more higher rated movies. It might be the highest rated overall.
Yeah.
I know that Late Night hasn't beaten humor, though.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But then again, like I said, the low rating in humor in this movie is not a bad thing whatsoever. So it's kind of hard to compare that, but I'm pretty sure that those 2 movies are pretty neck and neck in terms of who has the highest score. Maybe Butterfly Kisses has it up there. I don't remember our scorings.
I don't either.
But well, I mean, I have it in my notes, but I'm not going to go back and look at it.
If you haven't seen it, please go watch it immediately. Buy it on DVD. It's worth supporting the creators, the team behind it.
It's worth paying full price.
Oh, absolutely. Buy it on digital, rent it at Redbox, whatever your method is of watching content. Go watch it. It's awesome.
Well, all right. That was our 100 sub review of Smile.
Thank you once again. For 100 subscribers.
We honestly can't believe that we made it this far.
And this quick, I know we had some big gaps in between. Yeah. Life just gets in the way, unfortunately.
Which, let's touch on that. So, D-Mac, number 1, what'd you think of the movie?
I love the movie. I thought everything about it was done tastefully and very well. I really have no qualms about it. It was definitely scary. The jump scares were really good. They weren't cheap. The acting was really good. I'm gonna give it to the lead and really all the actors. Honestly, everyone did a really good job at portraying their role and being realistic. Yeah, I mean, I really I don't even really know what else to say. I thought everything was done really well. It's refreshing to see a horror movie, especially a horror movie, done like super well, and it's refreshing to see a movie where you really feel like the people who were making it care and want to actually scare people. It was just a really phenomenal movie.
Well, thank you, D-Mac. D-Mac is still with us. I know that we've been kind of posting on our community that, like the editing has been on the slow side. We all work full-time jobs. So, life gets in the way a little bit. And because of that...
we don't get Saturdays off like the girl in this movie.
That's why we're offended. But, our editor, former editor, D-Mac, he has a lot going on in his life, even more than we do. And so he is sticking to being our cameraman and our audio mixer for now, while we have a new editor who edited by this point videos that you've seen. They started they started with I Die Every Night for 2 minutes and 11 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And so since then, they have taken over. It's actually a fan of our community and one of our patrons has taken over as our editor, MacLeod. So give a good shout out for them, show some love to MacLeod. They've been doing a bang up job. So thank you, MacLeod, whenever you edit this. And also we have another editor that might start working soon. So we're getting a little team going because we're not making money at this right now. So we're all doing it with our free time, just out of passion for doing it.
Yeah.
So,
but most of all, thank you again for 100 subs.
Like I said, we never thought we would make it this far when we started this. We just
especially this soon.
Yeah, this soon, especially. Like, I know that 100 subs probably means nothing to some of you that are watching this, but it's a big deal for us. Like, just the fact that there are 100 people that liked our content enough to do that. That's a big deal. So thank you.
And before we close out, I guess we need to play our Rotten Tomatoes game.
Yeah.
This is gonna be, I don't know.
I feel like the score is not gonna it's not gonna mirror what I think it should be.
But you need to guess what you would think from a critic's perspective.
A critic's perspective.
Like, you're just a regular critic, you've seen it all, and you're going to write your review.
Okay, so start with a critic score.
You want me to go first?
I'll go first. For critic score, I'm gonna give it an 82. For audience score, I'm gonna give it an 89.
Oof. It's rough because I feel like critics, this might be one they're a little more judgmental on, but I think I'll say critics gave it a 79 and the audience would give it, they'd be more generous, maybe an 84. I think that's what I'm gonna lock in. 79, 84.
Alright.
Critic score for Smile is 79%.
I guessed it on the dot.
Mr. Zombie Cat was on the money with that one. And the audience score for Smile is 77%.
Oh, wow. Come on, guys.
Surprisingly, yeah, I definitely expected it to be higher.
At least push that 80.
Yeah.
I suck at this game.
I guess that puts another point for... Which the thing is, I've been looking at critic scores since I was like 5.
But also, here's another thing for you, Zombie Cat. Before we started doing this channel, every time I looked at Rotten Tomatoes, the critic score was low, the audience score was high. That's always how it was, and as soon as we started doing this damn channel, they switched it up on me. I hate that. And also, why is the score so low for this movie?
Yeah, it seems like most people I know love this movie. I have never met besides one person who didn't really enjoy this movie. Yeah, it's great. It's great.
If I was a critic, I'd give it an 82.
But at the same time, who knows how many people reviewed it? It's like, that's not everybody on Earth's opinion. It's
right.
Like just
somebody out there hates this movie.
Oh yeah.
Well, it is their least favorite horror movie they've ever seen in their life.
Yeah, that's every movie though. So
yeah.
You might watch it and hate it.
Yeah.
And you can let us know.
You know what? If you do hate it, come talk to us in the comments. No, I'm serious. We need some more action down there anyway. Also, if you didn't know, we have a Patreon, and here are the wonderful supporters of the Patreon. Oh, look, there's our editor, right there. But you can join our Patreon for as low as $5 a month if you want your name put at the end of every video. We have all different kinds of tiers, but like always, all profits are from the Patreon go directly back into the channel. That's actually how we bought this wonderful little device that this mic is plugged into, which we are saving up to get another mic for both of us. So it is being used. It's just, it takes time.
And if you want to follow said Patreon, the tag is just The Horror Den. It'll have our same profile picture of the skull, and the zombie cat is the profile picture. You can't miss it. We also have an Instagram at the Horror Den channel. We always post whenever we upload a new video, or maybe we're out at the movies about to see something, we'll post, and that could maybe give you some insight on what we're going to be going to review in the near future.
Yeah, so go give us a follow over there if you want to support our channel more and support us as creators as we expand our little group and we're making more videos and have some bigger plans for the future. Just head on over to Patreon if you so desire. And also lastly, please, if you like what you saw here, like, comment, subscribe.
Yeah,
it may
helps the algorithm a lot.
Yeah,
so
it helps way more than you could ever know. So just if you like what we do here and want to see more, just do that for us. And but other than that, guys, 100 subs. That's crazy. But most importantly, to all 107 of you at the time of this recording, stay spooky out there.